Welcome back to Coast Sports. I'm Michael Fiumefreddo. This is the only show for the fans, by the fans. And before we get into it, I just want to have everyone take a second and just breathe. Everyone relax. We're taking a break from all the election news, the mayhem that's going on. Every state's in disarray right now, but this is not about that. This is about sports. But what I did notice, though, is while I was watching this election process go on, while I was watching each state come in, while the percentages keep going up and down, I was thinking to myself, a lot of people ask how I watch football all day, how I keep track of fantasy football, and honestly, it's the exact same thing what was going on this week on Tuesday. You watch a state go up, someone's winning, your guy's winning, the other team's going. Then someone wins a state, it's like they score a touchdown, and you're like, oh no. But then your guy scores and you're like, yeah, let's go. And it's just a back and forth, and you got to get to that number, you're like, oh, I don't think we're going to win. And then like a couple more states come in. It's just a whole big thing, very stressful. I do it every week, and to all my fans out there who don't know how I do it, this is how it is. I know all my lady friends that watch the show, they always ask me, like, what does this mean? What does that mean? It's the same thing, Just a lot more important than putting random guys on a team and going up against your best friends, sometimes for money, sometimes for bragging rights. But other than that, Week 8 in the NFL was pretty interesting if you were watching Red Zone and not if you were watching those primetime games. 0 for 3 on those. Pretty good games, but just the teams and the product that was on the field. First, you had Carolina going up against Atlanta. Neither team's got a winning record right now, and Atlanta does not look like both teams went to the Super Bowl in the past 5 years, but neither team looks the same as they did in those days. Then you come over with the Danucci Cowboys and the Carson Wentz-led Eagles, NFC East division on the line. But then you realize both teams have less than 2 wins, so did it really matter? That game was pretty bad. And then Monday night, another close game, but I think Daniel Jones kind of got exposed for the New York Giants, and Tom Brady led that team to another victory. They retake position in the NFC South, have the division lead there. We'll talk about that. We'll give some mid-season awards as we now have passed the halfway point of this 2020 season. But today we're going to start off, I know I did it last month when I talked about my power rankings 1 month into the season. Now we're officially 2 months into the season, and let's see how they compare from that time 4 months ago, 4 weeks ago. Selections got all my times messed up, 4 years, 4 weeks ago. There we go. So here's where we started off. After week 4 of the NFL season, I had Seattle at 1. They were looking good. Russell Wilson's still probably my MVP candidate. Green Bay's pretty high up. They kind of dropped off since then. Baltimore I had pretty low. I still don't. We'll get into where they are in a second. But then we got some other teams. Patriots in the top 10. We know how their season's going. Bunch of teams down low. Panthers were down low. Bengals kind of low on there. Vikings starting to win a couple games. Chicago's a weird one because originally they were 4-1 at this point, if I do recall. But they started to win more games. I think at that point we weren't sure what they were, and they've started to move up. Now they've lost 2 of their last games. So they're going to be one team that's up right now, even though I still think they're dropping back to where I originally had them. But this is what I have for this week's rankings. And just a couple things we could point out. Take a look at those real quick. But we got the new number 1 team, and that's the Pittsburgh Steelers. And right now they're the only undefeated team. It's kind of obvious. I think if you're the only undefeated team left, you should be the number 1 team unless you've gone up against the Jets every week, which they haven't. So, yeah, they should be number 1. Seattle's lost a game to the Cardinals that really was an interesting one. They've dropped down to 4 now. I think Tampa Bay and Kansas City have kind of passed them up. Ravens I still have right behind them, which is, I think, starting to show. They dropped a game to the Steelers, which is another reason why I have them up. Steelers beat the Titans 2 weeks ago, the Ravens this week. Those were both top-tier teams, and they're showing that they're significantly better than both of those. Other ones, now I want to get into some of the teams that have really jumped up in the rankings. I'll put them up again. And yeah, just look, here's week 4 again. Arizona in that mediocre tier. They weren't doing too well. I think a lot of people were expecting them to be there for most of the season, but now they're in my contender category. And same with the Miami Dolphins. They were in that same mediocre category, even further down the list. They've bumped all the way up. Cardinals were at 20 that week. Now they're in the top 10. And Dolphins at 23 moved up to 16. So, yeah, just those teams look like they're playing really well. We'll talk about the Cardinals upsetting Seattle. Both have young quarterbacks, Kyler Murray and Tua Tagovailoa, who won his first start against the LA Rams last week. Those guys are playing phenomenal. I saw something on Tua's saying the Dolphins organization was just kind of giving him a tryout in these last half of the season. They wanted to see if they can look for a new quarterback as the draft gets closer, but he played pretty well. He held his own. The defense and special teams really did help him out a little bit, but he looks like he can play in this league, and I don't think they'll be moving on from him anytime soon. The Dolphins have found their quarterback for the foreseeable future. Both of these guys right now, Cardinals, are in the playoffs as we speak, if the season ended today, and the Dolphins are knocking right on the door at 4-3. Nobody really expected them to be here, but here we are talking about it. Let's put those power rankings up once more just to look at some other teams. Dallas dropped them all the way down to 31. Ben DiNucci does not look good. Dak Prescott was really the only shot for this team. The defense is horrendous. And I don't know if you've been watching them. I've kept an eye on those Dallas games for a while now, but Zeke doesn't look that good even right now. Amari Cooper's not even getting the ball. CeeDee Lamb 2 weeks ago had like one catch, and it might have been a rush attempt, and it went for 1 yard. So this whole offense is falling apart with Ben DiNucci or Andy Dalton. DiNucci's getting the start this week against the Steelers, who are the number 1 team. And this looks like another loss for them. It's a throwaway season. They could look to draft a quarterback now so they don't have to pay Prescott, but the way this team was looking, I thought they were a playoff team with Dak, but right now they don't look like anything's really going on there. Ben DiNucci's getting the start this week against Pittsburgh as Andy Dalton's now placed on the COVID list. So I wouldn't get your hopes up if you're a Cowboys fan this week for them pulling up the upset. San Francisco, they won a game against the Rams, who I will get into what I think of them in a second, because back when the first month happened, I thought they were title contenders, and now I'm not so sure. But they won a game. They fought hard against Seattle. Then they lost Jimmy Garoppolo. They lost George Kittle for the year. They lost Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, both out this game. Mostert's still on IR. This team looks like, I think I talked about this in week 2 when this same thing was going on. They look like the locker room at halftime in Space Jam. Their whole team's hurt. They're saying Jimmy G might not play another game as a 49er. They're looking to move on from him, maybe bring in someone else. It's just a mess there. They're going to start to really drop down my rankings. Where do I have them right now? I have them right behind the Patriots, who they beat. And yeah, they're at 19, just inside that top 20, but it's not going to last too long. I can see them falling to maybe where the Panthers are, Broncos maybe, somewhere around there as the season goes on. And of course, the Jets still stink. They're tanking. We know it's not going to go well for them this year. This is not their year. Tank for Trevor. Fingers crossed. But anyway, moving on to teams that are actually good at football right now and are competing for a playoff spot. We're halfway through the season. A lot of teams are starting to have their bye. But right now, here's the playoff standings as we see them. On the left side, you can see the NFC, and the right is the AFC. So we'll start off with the AFC. You got Pittsburgh, Kansas City up there. Buffalo still holding strong as the division lead. And Tennessee, right now, they're actually tied with Indianapolis, who's at 6 right now. And then you got Ravens, Browns would be in the playoffs right now. Raiders, Dolphins. So I'll give you my locks right now for that division. I think Pittsburgh gets in, Kansas City gets in, Buffalo maintains that lead. The rest of the division's kind of shaky. The Patriots aren't the same team they were. I think Tennessee stays in their division lead, or at least gets into the playoffs. And Baltimore, they're going to make it as a wild card. They're still one of the best teams in the league. But now moving on to the other 4 teams I mentioned, we're going to go with the Colts, the Browns, Raiders, Dolphins for the AFC. We're going to play a little bit of contender or pretender. So we're starting off with the Colts. Right now they're tied for the division lead. They're tied for the division lead, which might sound shocking the way Tennessee's been playing, but they dropped 2 straight. And right now it's looking like the Colts are playing really well. They put up 41 points against the Lions. This week they're playing the Ravens, who are another team that they got a lot of incentive in that one to maybe move up to either the 5th or the 4th spot in the playoff push right now. But yeah, this offense looks like they can put up points. But the defense is the real heart and soul of this team, even without their one of their top guys in Malik Hooker, who's out for the season with an Achilles tear. They're second least in yards given up per game, so I forget the team that's right above them, but they're also in the top 5 with a +5 turnover differential this year. So this team's legit. I think it's something that we said about the Bears when they were winning a lot of games against weaker teams, but this Colts team, Phillip Rivers at quarterback, they got a great running back tandem. We saw Nyheim Hines have a great week last week. Jonathan Taylor's still there. And Jordan Wilkins can find the end zone at any given time too. So I think with that, they look like a legitimate team and a definite playoff contender. I'm going to say contender for them. But within this month, they play Tennessee twice. So maybe if they go 1-1, 2-0, they're a lock for the playoffs. And I think we're talking about Tennessee in this bubble scenario over Indianapolis. Moving down the list, first pretender of the video, I'm going to go with the Cleveland Browns. You know, they're 5-3 right now, but just ugly football going on in Cleveland. They're without their best receiver in Odell Beckham. They don't have a great offensive line. Nick Chubb's coming back. We'll see how that's helping out. The run game does look well, though, I have to say, for this offensive line. Baker Mayfield's kind of shaky at best. It depends on who he's playing. Whenever he's not playing the Bengals, he doesn't look like a guy that should have been the number 1 overall pick. They still got 2 more division games to Pittsburgh and Baltimore. They'll play them each once, but they still haven't. They look terrible against both of those teams. So even with that, they play 5. They're going to be at 5 losses, and maybe they lose a couple. They lost to the Raiders last week, and it just doesn't look like things are going in the right direction for Cleveland. I can see them falling out of the playoffs and being in that sort of purgatory where you don't make the playoffs, but you don't get a top 10 pick. I think that's where this team is headed. Baker Mayfield might be somewhere else next year, to be totally honest. Next up, the team that beat them this week, the Las Vegas Raiders. They look like contenders. Let's talk about some of their track record so far. They're the second best team in their division, and the team that's above them in the division, the Kansas City Chiefs, they upset a couple weeks ago. So I think this team's another one that not many people give them credit. They're playing extremely well. Derek Carr was an MVP candidate a few years back. He's not at that level, but he's playing much better than he has in the years since then. And coming up with them, they do play the Chiefs one more time, but we saw how that can go. They can beat them. I don't know if it'll happen again, but it's definitely a possibility. But their schedule is extremely easy going the rest of the way. They got Denver twice. They got the Falcons, who don't look that good. They got the Jets, who that should be an easy win for them. And then they got the LA Chargers in division again, which they're 2-4, 2-5. So I think they're definitely a contender. And finally, we'll finish it off with the Dolphins at 4-3. They're a sneaky contender. I think maybe if I'm wrong about Las Vegas, if the Browns definitely fall off, like I think it's going to happen, they're going to be able to get a spot. I mean, Tua looked good. I think he's the right guy for this team. Young guy, mobile, definitely can throw the ball. People are they don't have a lot of tape on him. It's kind of like when Lamar Jackson came in a few years ago to a Baltimore team that was in the same scenario in that playoff bubble won like 7 or 8 games, and they were in the playoffs. But I think this is the same situation with Tua. He looks great. He threw a touchdown in the red zone, which is very hard to do for an NFL quarterback, let alone a first start for an NFL quarterback. Defense, if they played like they did against LA, this is a team that can compete. Brian Flores has them on the right track. They have convincing wins against San Francisco and the Rams, who are both currently playoff teams, I believe. They also held their own against the Seattle Seahawks and the Buffalo Bills, who are up there right now. So this is definitely a team that gets in, or could get in. Unfortunately, I don't think they will. I'm going to say with the 5 locks that I had, Pittsburgh, Kansas City, Buffalo, Tennessee, and Baltimore, I think the Colts and the Raiders get in the AFC playoff picture. Moving on, we'll look at the playoff picture again, talking about the NFC now. Run through my locks real quick. I got Seattle, Tampa Bay, Green Bay, I think will stay there, and the Eagles. Now the Eagles are a little interesting because they stink. We know that. They're 3-4-1, have a losing record, but they're going to get into the playoffs regardless because their division's so bad. So I'm going to keep them there. I think they will be a lock for the playoff, but I wouldn't have too many high expectations for this team, especially since they'll probably be the lowest of the division champions and will play the best team. Speaking of the next 4 teams down, we'll do the contender pretender with them. We're going to start off with New Orleans, who I think they're a contender, but I can't be too sure, to be totally honest. I think they're a contender just because besides Tampa Bay, they're the second best team in the NFC South and will win a couple games in division. They're gonna go up against Tampa Bay, who they beat in Week 1. So if they have them, they're going to be the number 1 team in the NFC South. But looking at the teams below them, I think they're better than Arizona, better than LA. I don't think there's another team in there that can make a real playoff push. We'll talk about Chicago in a second. But the 49ers we talked about before, they're not looking too good. They're got a lot of injuries. I think this is a throwaway year for them. But yeah, the only real competition and the only people they got to worry about are Tampa Bay, and if they lose this weekend. Other than that, they're getting Michael Thomas back, I hope, for fantasy purposes. But this is the year that they need to make a move. I mean, my friends were talking about this the other day. After this season, the Saints will be $90 million over the cap. So they're going to have to start getting rid of guys. Drew Brees is getting older. They might move on from him. Kamara just got paid a boatload of money. So we'll see what they have to do with him. But guys on the defensive side of the ball as well. This I don't think the Saints are a title contender, but they're definitely going to make the playoffs. I just wouldn't have high expectations for them. I think it's time to hit the reset button and just clean house, move on, start all over. Moving on, the Cardinals, who I mentioned upset the Seattle Seahawks a few weeks back, just had a bye week this week. They're looking like a contender as well. And I'll admit, I was one of the people that said that they would be probably like the Cleveland Browns were 2 years back when they got Odell Beckham, they got Jarvis Landry, they got all these pieces, Kareem Hunt. And it's just like they were signing a lot of weapons, but in the wrong spot. They needed an offensive line. They needed defense. But they're bringing in a top receiver like the Cardinals did with DeAndre Hopkins this year. I was wrong. They're playing phenomenal, and I think this is a team that will make some noise in the playoffs, especially if they get to go up against the Philadelphia. Now, let's talk about what they're doing. They're 2-0 in their division. They beat the San Francisco 49ers in an upset victory Week 1. They beat the Seattle Seahawks 2 weeks ago. And now, right now, if they start to win more games, Seattle loses 2, they're only 2 games back. They'll be a division champion, possibly, if Seattle drops a couple games. They have a tough schedule coming up. They're playing Buffalo this week, but other than that, Seattle has a shot to fall out of that division lead if Arizona keeps winning. And yeah, that's all I got to really say about them. Next up, I got the LA Rams, another division team. And honestly, I've been having this debate with some of my friends. They don't think, to use Among Us terms, they think the Rams are the imposter. But honestly, I really don't know, because you look at teams that they've played. They played all NFC East teams. They lost to the San Francisco 49ers with guys returning from injury. I understand this loss to Miami just because they were coming from the West Coast into a 1 o'clock game on the East Coast. The East Coast team obviously had a bye and they were in their home stadium. They didn't have any film on the quarterback. It just looked like an ugly game from the start, and that might have had an impact on the game. But I think you got to look at this team from the perspective of Jared Goff, because he's a number one pick. He's been to the Super Bowl. I would say he's benefiting under Sean McVay's system, but there are games where he can't produce, and there are other games where he looks like he did that year they went to the Super Bowl. They have the weapons to do it. They got the defense with Aaron Donald. It just all falls on the shoulders of Jared Goff. And here's what I'm saying. When Jared Goff plays like an elite quarterback, a first overall pick, the Rams are a top 10 team. I think they can win a playoff game or two. I think they can even make it to the Super Bowl with a couple upsets. However, when Jared Goff plays like a Baker Mayfield, it's not going to go too well. This team doesn't look like a playoff team like that. They lost to the Dolphins. They lost to some other bad teams. They beat the Bears, but we'll shift gears to them now. The Bears, I think they're another pretender. So, yeah, I'll call the Rams a contender. Bears, I'm calling a pretender. They lost to the Rams and the Saints, who we talked about. They're going to be their main playoff competition. They play Green Bay two more times this year. So that's another possible 2 losses, although Green Bay did get upset by Minnesota. I think they have a problem at quarterback too. Nick Foles is not the answer. Mitch Trubisky is not the answer. They can't keep rotating them back and forth like it's a college team. And this goes back to the age-old question. If you have 2 good quarterbacks, do you even have 1 good quarterback? Guess not, and we're seeing that. This team right now, I'll put the standings up just so you can see. They're at 5-3. I think they finish around that 500, maybe 9-7, 8-8, maybe even 7-9 if things just go south completely. But for the NFC, I'm going to go Cardinals make it as the 5 seed, so they'll jump the Saints. I think New Orleans goes to 6, and then the Rams, obviously, at 7, just because there's nobody else. Look, I said San Francisco's out. I said Detroit's out. Nobody else is over 500, and Chicago, I think, is going to fall off. So that's just where I stand on it, and that's what I think the playoff field is. I think next week I might actually make a playoff bracket, or might wait a little longer. Actually, about next week, we're going to do our show on Monday, and we're going to have former NFL player Dominique Easley join the show. We'll talk football. We'll talk what he's doing now in his life post-football. It's going to be a great show. You might not want to miss that one. But anyway, we're going to shift gears to the last segment, and I'm going to go through my NFL midseason or award predictions for what I think is going to happen the Saturday night before the Super Bowl. So I got the 6 real major awards. I got Coach of the Year, Offensive Rookie of the Year, Defensive Rookie of the Year, Defensive Player, Offensive Player, and of course MVP. We'll start with Coach, and it's got to go to Mike Tomlin right now. Undefeated, best record obviously. His team looks the best they have in the past 5 years. The defense is one of the best in the league. The offense is one of the best in the league. They got tons of weapons. They look like they can go 16-0. They look miles better than the Ravens right now. They look miles better than the Titans after those 2 games. They're going to finish with the best record in football. And I don't know. I might have to look into that. Do they play the Chiefs? But we'll have to see, because that game would be a very good one that I think could determine the Super Bowl champion. They can finish the season 16-0, and if I think they do, Mike Tomlin, very underrated coach in my opinion. He will win the MVP award. And I think he actually just passed Tony Dungy for most wins by an African-American coach as well. So congrats to him on that. Hopefully, hope to many more, and maybe even a Coach of the Year award at the end of the season. Offensive Rookie of the Year, I'm going to go with, even though I'm wearing the USC sweatshirt, and I'm going to talk about an Oregon guy, I'm going to call him my guy, the Moneymakers starting quarterback. Justin Herbert wins the award, hands down. I think he's going to edge out Joe Burrow based off of how they finish record-wise. It's not his fault that they lost that game to the Broncos this past weekend. The defense kind of blew it. I think Justin Herbert is a phenomenal quarterback. He's playing like a top 10 one right now as a rookie quarterback. He looks like just one of the best quarterbacks in the league right now, and he's barely even played a half a season. He only played 6 games, in fact. He's currently tied for 7th in the entire league right now with 15 passing touchdowns. That's a lot more than Joe Burrow has. I think he's got one more win than Burrow as well. Are the Bengals on this? No, they're not. But yeah, neither team's on that, so we won't. I'll have to fact check that one as well. But Justin Herbert will probably end the season with more touchdowns, more wins than Burrow, and I think this is his award to lose. On the defensive rookie side, I think the race is a little bit closer, and it's between Patrick Queen and Chase Young. So Patrick Queen, linebacker for the Ravens, later round pick, and then you got Chase Young, top 2 pick for the Washington football team. I'm going to go with Patrick Queen here. I think he beats out Chase Young in a tight race for the award. And it's not going to come off of stats. I'll tell you that right now. Both of them have identical stats. A couple of them, I think Patrick Queen's got one more turnover forced than Chase Young, but they're both dominant players. Both should be in contention for this award. The reason I'm going with Queen here is because he's one of the integral parts of this Ravens defense, which is arguably the best unit in the league. The Washington football team's defense, they haven't gotten them to win any real games. I think when I'm looking at this, the football team's going to finish with maybe 1 or 2 wins on the year. Ravens are going to be in the playoffs. So I think when you're looking at guys that really help out the team, it's going to be Patrick Queen, and lock it in, he's going to win that award. Moving on to Defensive Player of the Year, though, it's got to be Myles Garrett. I mean, former number 1 overall pick, this guy looks like a beast. We talked about him a couple weeks back. He's got 9 sacks on the year, which is tied for the league lead with Aaron Donald, who won the award last year. But Myles Garrett has a sack in 6 straight games, highest in the league. I think it might be a record. But yeah, whenever teams are going up against the Cleveland Browns, they have to worry about Myles Garrett, and he still finds a way to get it. He's got 4 forced fumbles as well on the year, so we're halfway through. That's a pretty good stat, and maybe he's going to keep getting sacks each week. He could finish with 20 if he really pushes hard. I think they're on a bye this week, so they got 6 more games left to play. 8 more games left to play. I went backwards, but yeah, 8 more games left to play. Maybe he can finish with 20 sacks, and the last time someone did that, I think, was J.J. Watt, and he won the award. So Myles Garrett, lock it in as well. Now, Offensive Rookie of the Year and MVP usually have gone to the same person in years past. Todd Gurley was the one exception a couple of years back when many thought he should have been MVP, but ended up just getting Rookie or Offensive Player of the Year. I think Russell Wilson wins both of the awards, and here's why. Just take a minute, read this tweet. Now, it says here that after the game against the 49ers, Russell Wilson has 26 passing touchdowns on the season. Peyton Manning was not even on this pace when he put up the record for 55. Now, I'm going to bring out my phone here to do a little calculation. So we got Russell Wilson's stats up in front of me right now. I'm going to the calculator. We got 26 touchdowns through 7 games. Gives us 3.7. I don't know if you can see here. But now we're going to take 3.7. Obviously, you can't have a third touchdown, but we'll see what the number comes out to. We'll times it by 16 games. 59. 59 touchdowns. You can do the math if you don't think I was right, but Russell Wilson is on pace for 59 touchdowns on the season. And I know it doesn't sound like a lot to shatter a record, but that shatters a 4-point record of 55 touchdowns. we have not seen some guy throw almost 4 touchdowns a game. It seems like every week Russell Wilson's dishing out touchdowns. DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, David Moore, Chris Carson when he's healthy. Every week it's just the same thing. They don't run the ball in the red zone anymore, which is honestly ironic considering what happened to them a few years back. But like we said, Pete Carroll's letting Russ cook. This team is a Super Bowl contender. It could end up with the number 1 seed in the NFC. And Russell Wilson's never received an NFL MVP vote in his career. I think this year he gets it done. So like I've been saying, lock it in. Coach of the Year, Mike Tomlin. Offensive Rookie of the Year, Justin Herbert. Defensive Rookie, Patrick Queen. Defensive Player, Myles Garrett. And then Russell Wilson takes home MVP and Offensive Player of the Year. So anyway, that's going to really do it for me, besides the fact that we're going to be back tomorrow on Spotify. And if you don't check out our Casual Saturdays episodes, I definitely think you should. We have a little fun. I bring on some of my best friends. We talk about their teams. We talk about fantasy football. We talk about betting. But this week we're going to do it a little earlier. Friday's going to be the day. And that's because I'm bringing on some of my Trojan buddies back in California at USC. We're going to talk about their upcoming game against the Arizona State Sun Devils, Saturday at 12 Eastern Time. It should be a good one, but anyway, that's going to do it for me. I'm Michael Fiumefreddo. You're watching Coast to Coast Sports, the only show for the fans, by the fans. And just to end off on a positive note, I'll play us out with a nice little TikTok I found.